He returned home after 5 days away on a business trip expecting peace, but found his house completely dark. In the only room with light, his young son was quietly cutting faces out of family photographs, insisting someone was rewriting their past. What began as one unsettling night soon uncovered a chilling conspiracy that threatened hundreds of families. Stay until the end, because every clue changes everything. Before we begin, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more calm dad stories. I had been away for 5 days on what should have been an ordinary business trip. The meetings had been long, the flights delayed, and the hotel coffee had tasted exactly the way I expected it to. By the time I finally pulled my car into my driveway, it was a little after 10 at night. I remember looking at my house and immediately feeling that something wasn't right. Every light was off. The porch light, which my son always remembered to leave on whenever I traveled, wasn't glowing. The upstairs bedroom windows were completely dark. Even the motion light over the garage failed to activate as I stepped out of the car. My name is Matthias Velker, and I have learned that sometimes the smallest details become the loudest warnings. I stood in the driveway for a few seconds, listening. Normally, I could hear the distant sound of my neighbor's television or the soft hum of insects in the trees. That night, the entire neighborhood seemed unusually quiet. I grabbed my suitcase from the trunk and walked toward the front door, convincing myself that maybe the power had gone out while I was gone. Even then, something about the silence felt deliberate rather than accidental. When I unlocked the front door, it opened without resistance. The house was completely dark. I reached toward the wall for the light switch. "Don't." The voice was barely above a whisper. I froze before my fingers touched the switch. It was my son, Kalen. "I'm in the dining room," he answered quietly. His voice wasn't frightened. It wasn't panicked. It sounded focused. I closed the door behind me without making another sound and waited for my eyes to adjust. A faint beam of white light appeared across the floor. It came from a small flashlight resting on the dining table. As I walked closer, I finally saw him. Kalen sat perfectly still in one of the dining chairs. Spread across the table were dozens of family photographs. Some were old printed pictures from albums. Others had been removed from picture frames that usually hung throughout our house. He held a pair of small scissors. With unbelievable patience, he carefully cut faces from one photograph after another. Mine. His late mother's. Friends. Neighbors. Even pictures taken during birthdays and school events. Tiny piles of photographs surrounded him like pieces of an unfinished puzzle. "What are you doing?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he finished trimming one final photograph before placing it beside another pile. Then he looked directly at me. "I need to separate the real ones from the fake ones." For a moment, I thought he was joking. He wasn't. I walked closer and picked up one of the photographs lying near the edge of the table. It showed the two of us standing outside our home during winter. I remembered taking that picture several years ago. At least I thought I did. There was someone else standing between us. A man around my age with short dark hair and a confident smile. His arm rested comfortably on my shoulder as though we had known each other for years. I had never seen him before in my life. "Who's this?" I asked. Kalen answered immediately. He wasn't there before. I looked more carefully. Everything about the photograph appeared authentic. The lighting matched perfectly. The shadows were correct. The reflections on the snow looked natural. Nothing about it resembled a poorly edited image. If someone had shown me that picture a week earlier, I might have believed my own memory had failed. "You remember taking this picture?" I asked. Kalen nodded. "It was just us." I stared at the stranger's smiling face. The longer I looked at it, the more uncomfortable I became. It wasn't simply that an unfamiliar person had appeared in one family photograph. It was the feeling that whoever created this image understood exactly how to make it believable. I suddenly noticed something else. Every picture frame hanging on the dining room wall was empty. The hallway was the same. The living room shelves where framed photographs normally stood had nothing except dusty outlines showing where they had once been. "Did you take them all down?" I asked. "Yes." "Why?" "Because they kept changing." I laughed once. Not because I found it funny. Because my mind refused to accept what I had just heard. Pictures don't change. Memories don't rewrite themselves. There had to be another explanation. Maybe someone had broken into the house. Maybe this was an elaborate prank. Maybe someone had replaced our photographs while I was away. I sat across from Kaylin. "When did this start?" "3 nights ago. You didn't call me." I wanted to make sure I wasn't imagining it first. He reached beneath the table and lifted a cardboard storage box onto the surface. Inside were dozens more photographs. Every one of them had small handwritten notes attached. Real. Fake. Unsure. The labels were written in careful block letters. "You did all this?" He nodded. I compared every picture with the digital copies on Mom's old laptop. That caught my attention immediately. "What did you find?" "The digital copies changed too." I felt a chill move through my body. Digital files shouldn't change on their own. Printed photographs shouldn't suddenly include strangers. Neither should family albums. Unless someone had access to every version. I picked up another picture. This one showed Kaylin at his 10th birthday party. Again, the same unfamiliar man appeared in the background. Laughing. Holding a wrapped present. Standing close enough to suggest he belonged there. "He isn't real," Kaylin whispered. Then he slowly pushed 13 photographs across the table toward me. "I've already found 13 fake ones." I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the stranger smiling from photographs that should have contained only my family. Around sunrise I walked through every room in the house with a notebook, checking picture frames, old albums, and storage boxes. The more I searched, the stranger appeared again and again. Sometimes he stood beside me at what looked like a neighborhood barbecue. Other times he was sitting behind Kaylin during a school play. In one picture, he was even standing next to my late wife at what should have been our wedding reception. I knew with absolute certainty he had never been there. At 7 in the morning, Kaylin joined me in the kitchen carrying his mother's old laptop. "I checked the backup drive again," he said. "And the older copies have changed too." I stared at him. "That's impossible." "I know." He opened several folders filled with scanned family photographs. Every digital image matched the altered printed versions sitting on the dining table. There were no original files left. Whoever had done this hadn't simply swapped physical photographs. They had somehow replaced every accessible copy. I wanted to call the police immediately, but I stopped myself. What exactly would I report? Someone had changed photographs. It sounded ridiculous even inside my own head. After breakfast we decided to leave the house for a while. Fresh air usually helped me think more clearly, and I hoped looking at ordinary life would calm my nerves. Instead, the morning became even stranger. As I checked the mailbox, my next-door neighbor, Mrs. Ellery, waved from across the street with her usual cheerful smile. "Welcome home, Matthias," she called. "Thanks. How's your brother doing these days?" I frowned. "My brother." She laughed lightly. "Don't tell me you've forgotten Elias already. He was here helping you paint the garage just last summer." I forced a polite smile. "I think you're mixing me up with someone else." Her smile slowly faded. "No, I'm not. Draven was with both of you that day too." There it was. The same unfamiliar name. Draven. I didn't ask any more questions. Instead, I wished her a good day and walked back toward my car. Kaylin had heard the entire conversation. "She remembers him," he said quietly. "Or she believes she does." As we drove through the neighborhood, I paid closer attention to community bulletin boards posted near the park and recreation center. Several photographs advertised past charity events and neighborhood cleanups. The stranger appeared in nearly every one. Always smiling. Always standing close to different families. Always looking like he belonged. My heartbeat quickened. This wasn't limited to my house. We parked outside the local coffee shop where I had been a regular customer for nearly 10 years. The owner, Mr. Hollis, greeted me warmly. "Business trip again?" he asked. "Just got back. Good timing. I haven't seen you and Draven having breakfast together lately." I nearly dropped my coffee. I've never had breakfast with anyone named Draven. He chuckled as if I were making a joke. "Sure you have. Every Thursday for months." I looked at Kaylin. Neither of us spoke until we returned to the car. "This is bigger than our family," I finally said. He nodded. They all remember things that never happened. Instead of driving home, I headed toward the Oak Ridge Community Library. If someone had altered our family history, I wanted to know whether public records had changed as well. The library had recently completed a massive project to digitize decades of local newspapers, newsletters, and historical photographs. I remembered donating several old family pictures to one of their neighborhood history exhibits years earlier. Inside, the building was quiet except for the soft clicking of computer keyboards. The librarian, an elderly woman named Nora Fenwick, recognized me immediately. "Back from another trip?" she asked. "I need to check some archived photographs." "Of course." She pointed me toward the public research terminals. Within minutes, I found the neighborhood festival held 4 years earlier. I remembered attending with Kaylin. The archived photographs loaded onto the screen. There he was again. Draven. Standing beside us. One picture after another. As if he had always been part of our lives. I felt my stomach tighten. Then Nora walked over and casually said something that made the room seem colder than before. "If you're looking for those archives, you should know they were all restored by Draven Sorrell during our digitization project last year." The moment Nora mentioned Draven Sorrell's name, every uneasy feeling I had been trying to dismiss suddenly connected into one terrifying possibility. I kept my expression calm. "When exactly did he work here?" I asked. Nora adjusted her glasses before answering. "Almost every weekend for nearly 6 months. He volunteered to help us scan old newspapers, restore damaged photographs, and organize community records. He was incredibly patient. Everyone appreciated the help. Does he still volunteer?" She shook her head. "No. He finished the project and moved on to other community organizations." I thanked her and walked away before she noticed how unsettled I had become. Kaylin followed silently until we reached a quiet corner between the history shelves. "He had access to everything," my son whispered. "Looks that way. But why would anyone spend months changing old pictures?" That was the question I couldn't answer. People don't invest that much effort without expecting something valuable in return. We spent another hour searching through archived newspapers, newsletters, school yearbooks, and neighborhood event albums. The deeper we searched, the clearer the pattern became. Draven's face appeared everywhere. Not always in the center. Never drawing attention. Sometimes he stood in the background talking to someone. Sometimes he appeared at charity fundraisers. Other times he was simply walking past during local festivals. The placement was almost perfect. Natural enough that nobody would question it. I noticed something else. Every altered photograph had been taken within the last 15 years. Nothing older. It was as if someone had deliberately chosen a period of history that could still influence legal records, insurance claims, and personal relationships. When we finally left the library, I made a decision. We're going to find him. Kaylin looked at me. Without telling the police? I don't have enough evidence yet. Right now, all we have are photographs and impossible memories. Using the neighborhood directory, we located Draven's listed address less than 20 minutes away in a quiet subdivision on the other side of town. His house looked ordinary. Freshly painted. A neatly trimmed lawn. Flower beds carefully maintained. Nothing about the property suggested criminal activity. We parked half a block away. "What now?" Kalen asked. "We watch." Nearly 2 hours passed. Around 4 in the afternoon, a dark gray SUV pulled into the driveway. A man stepped out carrying 2 cardboard archive boxes. Even from a distance, I recognized him immediately. The same confident smile. The same short, dark hair. The exact face that appeared inside every altered photograph. For the first time, I was looking at Draven Sorel in real life. He unlocked the front door, carried the boxes inside, and disappeared. 15 minutes later he came back out wearing a different jacket. Instead of driving toward downtown, he headed east into the old industrial district where abandoned warehouses lined nearly empty streets. I waited several seconds before following. Traffic remained light enough that staying unnoticed wasn't difficult. Eventually Draven turned through a rusted security gate into a warehouse complex that had been closed for years. The building itself looked forgotten. Broken windows. Peeling paint. Faded company signs still hanging above loading docks. Draven entered with a key card. The large metal door slowly rolled shut behind him. We parked where the warehouse couldn't easily be seen from the road. "This doesn't feel like a storage business," I murmured. Kalen pointed toward the rear of the property. There. A smaller side entrance sat partially hidden behind stacked shipping containers. We quietly crossed the cracked pavement, careful to avoid loose gravel that might give away our footsteps. One of the side windows had been left slightly open. I carefully lifted myself high enough to look inside. At first, I thought I was looking at a document archive. Metal shelving stretched across the enormous warehouse. Hundreds of labeled boxes filled every aisle. Street names. Family names. Years. Everything was organized with disturbing precision. Then I noticed the photographs. Thousands of them. Original prints. Albums. Picture frames. Entire shelves devoted to individual families. Workers wearing white gloves carefully scanned photographs before placing them beside computers running advanced editing software. Nobody spoke. Only scanners, keyboards, and printers filled the warehouse with a steady mechanical rhythm. This wasn't one man's strange hobby. It was a professional operation. As I watched in disbelief, Draven opened one family album, removed a photograph, and handed it to an employee. Seconds later, the worker began digitally inserting another unfamiliar face into the image. Kalen slowly inhaled. "Dad." He didn't need to finish the sentence. We had just discovered the factory where people's histories were being rewritten. I forced myself to step away from the warehouse window before anyone inside noticed us. My heart was pounding so hard that I could hear it in my ears. Kalen remained surprisingly calm, but I could see from his eyes that he understood how dangerous the situation had become. We were no longer dealing with a strange mystery involving altered photographs. We had found an organized operation with employees, expensive equipment, and enough records to affect hundreds of families. "We need proof," I whispered. "We already saw it," Kalen replied. "Seeing it isn't enough." He understood immediately. If we went to the police with nothing but our story, it would sound impossible. We needed something that couldn't be dismissed. We circled around the back of the warehouse until we found a loading dock where several delivery pallets had been left unattended. One of the side doors hadn't closed completely, leaving a narrow gap just wide enough to hear voices inside. I carefully looked through the opening. The warehouse was divided into several sections. One area contained scanners and computers. Another held endless shelves packed with photographs and labeled storage boxes. Toward the center of the building stood a glass office overlooking everything below. Draven entered that office carrying a tablet computer. A few moments later, 3 employees joined him. Although I couldn't hear every word, several phrases reached us clearly. "Replace the insurance archive first." "Don't miss the property transfer records." "The Lawson collection must be finished before Monday." This wasn't random vandalism. Every alteration followed a schedule. Every family archive had become part of a larger plan. Kalen quietly pulled his phone from his pocket. "What are you doing?" "Recording." I nodded. He carefully aimed the camera through the narrow opening, capturing workers scanning photographs, editing images, and sealing completed files into labeled boxes. Then something unexpected happened. One employee carried a stack of folders directly beneath the security camera mounted near the ceiling. The folders opened as he walked. Dozens of printed documents spilled across the floor. While the workers hurried to gather everything, one page slid almost to the doorway where we stood hidden. Without thinking, I reached through the gap and pulled it toward me. It was a shipping manifest. Instead of furniture or office supplies, it listed names, family names, street addresses, delivery dates. Beside each name appeared one of 3 handwritten marks: pending, updated, completed. "This is their schedule," I whispered. Before I could fold the document into my jacket, an alarm suddenly sounded somewhere inside the warehouse. Every employee stopped moving. One of the security monitors displayed the side entrance. Our side entrance. Someone had noticed the door wasn't fully closed. Draven looked directly toward the monitor. He pointed toward our location. 2 security guards immediately ran across the warehouse floor. "Run," I told Kalen. We sprinted across the cracked pavement toward the parking area. Behind us, metal doors slammed open. Footsteps echoed through the empty industrial yard. The guards weren't shouting. They were moving with quiet discipline, as though chasing intruders was something they had practiced many times before. We reached my car just as one of them rounded the corner of a shipping container. I started the engine and accelerated out of the lot. In the rearview mirror, I saw a black cargo van pulling out behind us. "They're following us," Kalen said. "I know." The roads through the industrial district were nearly deserted, making it impossible to disappear in traffic. The van stayed close but never attempted to hit us. Instead, it matched every turn, every change in speed. "They want something," Kalen said. "The document." He looked down at the folded shipping manifest resting on the center console. "They know we took it." I reached for my phone with one hand and dialed emergency services. No signal. The industrial buildings blocked nearly every bar. The van closed the distance. Its headlights filled my rearview mirror. Then another vehicle suddenly turned into the intersection ahead, stopping sideways across the road. For one terrifying second, I thought we had driven into an ambush. I slammed on the brakes. The cargo van stopped behind us. We were trapped between both vehicles. The driver's door of the SUV ahead slowly opened. A woman stepped out holding a camera instead of a weapon. She looked directly at me, then at the van behind us. Without hesitation she shouted one sentence that made everyone freeze. "Matthias Velker, if you still have the evidence, don't let Draven take it." For a split second, nobody moved. The woman stood between my car and the SUV that blocked the road, holding a professional camera in one hand and raising her free hand to show she wasn't a threat. Behind me, the black cargo van remained idling, its engine rumbling like a warning. "Who are you?" I shouted through the open window. "My name is Mara Quillen," she answered without hesitation. "Investigative journalist. I've been tracking Draven Sorel for almost a year." The rear doors of the cargo van suddenly opened. 2 men stepped out. Neither carried visible weapons, but their expressions told me they weren't interested in conversation. Mara quickly pointed toward a narrow side street. "Drive. Now." Without giving myself time to question her, I turned the steering wheel sharply, forcing my car over the curb and onto the side road. The SUV immediately moved aside, allowing just enough room for us to pass. Mara followed close behind. The cargo van accelerated after both of us. "What if she's lying?" Kalen asked. "If she wanted to stop us, she already had the chance." We sped through a maze of industrial streets before finally reaching a busier avenue where evening traffic had begun to build. The van struggled to stay close as cars filled every lane. After several tense minutes, Mara flashed her headlights and turned into the parking lot of the Westbridge Police Department. I followed without hesitation. The cargo van slowed at the entrance. Instead of pulling in behind us, it continued driving past the station and disappeared into traffic. Only then did I finally breathe. Inside the police station, Mara introduced herself to the desk officer before leading us into a conference room. She placed several thick folders onto the table. "I've been investigating fraudulent property transfers across 3 counties," she explained. "Every case has one thing in common. Historical evidence somehow changes before court hearings." She opened the first folder. Inside were copies of family photographs, insurance records, neighborhood newsletters, and archived newspaper articles. Every file contained the same face: Draven Sorrell. "He inserts himself into local history," Mara continued. "Once people accept that he has always been part of a family's past, he uses forged relationships to support fake legal claims." I slowly unfolded the shipping manifest we had taken from the warehouse. Mara's eyes widened. "Where did you get this?" "Inside his warehouse." She carefully examined every page. "This isn't just a shipping list." She pointed to a column filled with coded numbers. "These are storage locations." Another column listed dates. Another listed replacement batches. Every completed entry matched one of the fraudulent property disputes Mara had spent months investigating. A detective named Victor Hale entered the room after reviewing Mara's files. At first, his expression remained skeptical. "You expect me to believe someone is rewriting family histories with edited photographs?" "No," Mara replied calmly. "I expect you to believe your own evidence." She handed him the folders. Then Kalen connected his phone to a monitor in the room. The video we had secretly recorded inside the warehouse filled the screen. Employees scanned original photographs. Computers digitally altered faces. Boxes labeled with family names stretched across endless shelves. Finally, the footage showed Draven personally inspecting the operation. The detective leaned forward. He replayed that section twice. Then he quietly picked up the phone. "I want a warrant request prepared immediately." Within an hour, officers from the Fraud Division, Cybercrime Unit, and Evidence Recovery Team assembled in the operations room. Maps of the warehouse covered the walls. Photographs from our recording were enlarged onto display screens. Teams planned multiple entry points. Nobody intended to give Draven enough time to destroy his records. Just before dawn, the convoy rolled toward the industrial district. Mara, Kalen, and I remained inside the police command vehicle several blocks away while tactical officers surrounded the warehouse. The operation began with surprising speed. Metal doors were forced open. Officers entered from 3 directions at once. For several minutes, radio traffic filled the command vehicle. Ground floor secured. Archive room clear. Multiple suspects detained. Then another voice came through the radio. "The primary target is not on site." My stomach sank. Draven had disappeared. The warehouse contained everything except the man who had built it. As officers continued searching the building, Detective Hale approached our vehicle carrying a sealed evidence box. He placed it carefully on the table between us. "We found this locked inside the office." I looked at the label. "Private Master Records." The detective slowly opened the lid. Inside rested dozens of handwritten notebooks. Every page appeared to document years of alterations in precise detail. Mara turned the first notebook over. Tucked inside the cover was a handwritten note in Draven's own signature. It contained a single sentence. "The originals are never destroyed. They are simply hidden where no one thinks to look." Draven's handwritten note changed everything. Until that moment, I had believed the original photographs had been destroyed forever. If they still existed, there was a chance every family affected by his operation could reclaim the truth. Detective Victor Hale immediately ordered another search, this time focusing not on computers or digital files but on storage facilities connected to the names listed inside Draven's notebooks. The notebooks were astonishingly detailed. Every page contained dates, addresses, client codes, warehouse transfers, and handwritten comments explaining why certain families had been targeted. Some cases involved fraudulent inheritance claims. Others centered on expensive properties where ownership could be manipulated by creating the appearance of long-standing personal relationships. Draven hadn't been changing photographs for entertainment. Every altered memory supported a financial scheme worth thousands, sometimes millions, of dollars. By midday, officers had identified a storage company on the edge of the city that appeared repeatedly throughout the notebooks. The rental contracts were hidden behind shell companies, but the paperwork eventually led investigators to a single climate-controlled facility. I was allowed to accompany Detective Hale and Mara Quillen after the manager unlocked the largest storage unit. The heavy steel door rolled upward with a low mechanical growl. None of us spoke. Floor-to-ceiling shelves filled the entire space. Cardboard archive boxes stretched from one wall to the other. Every box carried handwritten labels. Street names. Family names. Years. Some boxes looked decades old. Others had been stored only weeks earlier. Carefully, forensic technicians began opening the containers. Inside were original family albums, undeveloped film rolls, negatives, printed photographs, and handwritten notes identifying exactly where each item had been taken. Every genuine photograph had been preserved with remarkable care. He kept everything, Mara whispered. Detective Hale nodded. He intended to control history, not erase it. As the evidence team worked through the afternoon, phone calls began reaching families across the county. People arrived one after another, each hoping something precious had survived. I watched an elderly couple recognize photographs from their wedding that had disappeared years earlier. A middle-aged woman cried when detectives handed her a faded album containing the last pictures of her parents. A retired firefighter discovered original newspaper clippings proving ownership of property he had nearly lost in court. Every recovered box restored another piece of someone's life. Kalen stood beside me quietly. I told you they had to be somewhere, he said. You were right. He smiled for the first time in days. 2 evenings later, police received an anonymous tip from a motel employee nearly 200 miles away. A guest had been behaving strangely, refusing housekeeping and carrying sealed archive boxes into his room. Detectives immediately recognized the description. Draven Sorel. Local officers surrounded the motel before sunrise. This time he had nowhere to go. He surrendered without resisting. When investigators searched his room, they found 3 more boxes of original photographs and several passports under false identities. Even while running from the law, he had continued transporting pieces of other people's histories. Months passed before the trials finally ended. Draven was convicted on multiple counts of organized fraud, conspiracy, evidence tampering, identity manipulation, and financial crimes affecting hundreds of victims. His carefully constructed reputation collapsed under the weight of his own meticulous records. The notebooks he believed would protect his operation became the strongest evidence against him. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the courtroom. A man who had devoted years to rewriting other people's histories would now spend the rest of his life unable to escape his own documented crimes. Back at home, Kalen and I slowly rebuilt what had been shaken. We rehung every authentic family photograph after investigators returned them to us. This time, I didn't rush through the process. Each picture reminded me that truth deserves attention before someone else decides to rewrite it. The dining room looked familiar again. The walls no longer felt empty. The silence inside the house became peaceful instead of unsettling. One evening, while we shared dinner beneath the restored photographs, Kalen looked around the room and quietly said, "Now they look the way they're supposed to." I nodded. So do we. Looking back, the darkest moment wasn't opening the front door to a house without lights. It was realizing how easily people can accept a false version of the past when it is presented with enough confidence. Truth doesn't disappear all at once. Sometimes it changes one small detail at a time until nobody remembers questioning it. If this story reminded you that protecting your family, your memories, and the truth is always worth the effort, I truly appreciate your support. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next Calm Dad story. Thank you for spending your time with me, and I'll see you again in the next story.